Welcome back, everyone, to Spiritual Context for Worldly Chaos. And we are on to our next interview from 2023 with Brandy Rachelle. And Brandy, unfortunately, can't join us for the Saturday follow-up interview. It's going to be me and Jessica talking about the future ahead and what we have learned so far. But we are really excited to present Brandy to you. This is a very cool episode. She used to be a crime analyst, and she is a psychic medium tarot reader with a crazy cool story. Before we start this interview, I just want to remind everybody that on Sundays, I send out a newsletter called This Week in the Sky, where I let everyone know what's coming up astrologically in the week ahead. I talk about transits, I talk about eclipses, planets changing signs, and so forth. So if you like to stay up to date with astrology, definitely check it out. And now on to the first episode of Brandy.
So I was not the disciplined student, right? Because my mom, I wanted to learn. And so my mom got me a whole bunch of books on tarot. And then I had like Big Blue, which if you know anything about Wicca and paganism, it's called Big Blue. It's the Big Blue book. And Scott Cunningham, like she would always give me books. She would buy me books. And she was like, here you go. And I'm like, I don't want to, like, I want you to teach me. And she's like, here you go, read. So I had the books, but I refused to read. Like, I was just like, I just want to know. Like, I want you to tell me. And so it wasn't until I was probably right before I got pregnant with her, I think is when I really just was like, okay, you're going to read. You've been playing around with cards, but you haven't actually like applied yourself to learn. And then, of course, when I was pregnant, I had spare time because I had dropped out of high school.
This episode is dedicated to the major arcana card, Justice. Not only is Brandy a forensic psychic and crime analyst, she also happens to be a Libra. Listen as I ask about her transition from law enforcement to professional tarot reading and the crazy story behind her early retirement from criminal investigation. If you haven't yet, please follow this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And thank you to everyone who's left me a rating and review. I'm so glad this podcast has become a positive part of your lives. Now let's get on with the episode. Brandy is a professional tarot reader, forensic psychic, podcaster, and teacher. Outside of reading tarot for clients privately, serving as a crime analyst and forensic psychic to law enforcement agencies across the U.S., and co-hosting the Keepin' It Simple podcast with Jennifer Steedley, she teaches on a wide variety of topics. Her passion involves teaching others how to enhance their psychic abilities and communicate with spirit, deepen their tarot knowledge and universal wisdom through advanced psychology and symbolism, and how to use their intuitive gifts and the guidance of tarot to assist law enforcement agencies and the families of victims and missing persons as a forensic psychic. Having traversed both worlds, she understands the complex nature of each and where limitations prevent these two professions from working together in harmony. Her mission is to change the way in which the general public and law enforcement agencies view and engage with psychics and intuitives, both personally and professionally. Hello, Brandy. Thank you so much for coming on to the show today.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
I've been excited to talk to you. You have such an interesting past, and we're going to start there because I think for my audience to really understand you, I think they need to understand the job you had before this, and then we're going to get into tarot. But I want to start with, what was your job before tarot? Because I think you recently transitioned, maybe like a couple of years ago.
I transitioned fully in 2017, so we're sitting right at about 6 years. So prior to reading tarot professionally, I was a crime and intelligence analyst for law enforcement and the intelligence community.
Wow. So what got you into that? Was it just your interest in people, your interest in crime, obviously? What was the impetus?
So as a kid, I can remember watching Cops because it was the 80s and that was what you did. There wasn't, parental warnings on things. So we just watched Cops. I remember watching Cops I was about 3, and it was like one of my earliest memories. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to be a cop. That's what I want to do, which is very stereotypical because I'm a Libra. And so, and then it went on. The older I got, obviously you become aware of more of the criminal justice system, and then it's not just cops. And so then it went into, I was a teenager when the original CSI came out, CSI Las Vegas, and I used to watch that with my dad. And that's when I was like, I want to be an investigator. But I also remember, like my mom pointed out recently, she was like, I remember you playing with my tarot cards and watching 21 Jump Street. And so in the 80s and, early 90s. And so it's kind of just always been there. As it progressed, I went from investigations to the psychology side of things. And so when I was in school, I did a double major in psychology with an emphasis in forensics and then criminal justice. And then that went into graduate school.
Wow. That is it's just an extensive past for somebody who's now transitioned into full-time tarot reading. And it's funny, you're a Libra. I'm a Libra. I was thinking about being a lawyer. So I get it. Yeah, it's like anything that's like relationship, not emotionally, like it's like, how do we do this?
Yeah.
Air signs.
It's funny because you said you wanted to be a lawyer. And I actually, I could have gone to Harvard and I turned it down because I did not want to do, I was a single parent. I was also a teenage mom. And so I had a child right before I turned 19, and I had one of my legal professors was adamant that I go to law school. But then once she found out I had a child, which she could not believe because of how well I was doing in college, she flat out said, she said, like, it's very difficult to get through law school, no less with a child in tow. And she was like, you don't want to put your child on the back burner, and law school is going to require that of you. And so it's funny because that's the same. I toyed with that too. And I was like, no, the psychology's there. And I really don't want to. My memorization ability is kind of uncanny.
I'd imagine.
But at the same hand, I don't want to, law is not my
It's a whole other thing.
passion.
Yeah, it's a whole other thing.
It's a whole other side of the system.
And everybody doesn't, when you think about law, it's not what we see on Law and Order. That's a portion, that's a small portion of lawyers. Most of them are, corporate lawyers or lawyers who make sure that patents are, stay like in check, or copy or whatever, it's like more corporation, than it is defending the people or putting bad guys away.
Well, and that's what she was. She was the her husband was the district attorney, and she was the assistant district attorney. And so she wanted me to go into criminal law, and that was another thing, is I just told her, in order to do that, you have to be a defender first. And so I was like, that's the other thing, I can't defend a guilty person. I'm a Sag rising, and I'm like, I'll be the one out there being like, no, I'm sorry, my client's guilty. Just forget it. It's not happening. Bye. Bye, Felicia. Like, it's not. Yeah, there's no way I could do that. So it was just a culmination of things. But I think it is definitely an air sign thing. And then you add that Libra in there with that Sag rising, and it is just kind of like steamrolled into, I want to do investigations, and it actually wasn't even. I wasn't planning on going into law enforcement. I was going to work in, I did, but was going to work in federal intelligence. And then it kind of got changed in an interesting way into law enforcement.
Okay, that's so interesting. So let's go back to tarot and 21 Jump Street.
Yes.
Your mom said that you played with her tarot deck, so she was a reader, or?
Correct. Yes. So my mom learned, I think she was about 12. She was in a Catholic school. And so she actually learned from a nun. Her name was Lucia. And if anybody's from Houston that's listening, you'll know Lucia's Garden. Lucia ended up leaving the Catholic school as a nun and married a priest who also left the school. And they got married, and they opened a magic shop in Houston called Lucia's Garden. And that's where my mom learned.
Wow, these are some twists and turns already, even before your story. It's obvious that everybody's differentiations or everybody's different life stories probably helped you have your own, big U-turns or changes, right? So she learned at 12. How did did she just land there at 12? Did she just walk past and they just said, come on in, read? Or
I know so my mom was going to the school there. I don't remember if it was formalized or how it was, but I remember parts of the story she was at the school. Lucia was one of her teachers, one of the nuns. And so my mom has always questioned things about the traditional stories. Like, I remember being young and my mom being like, yeah, Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene, and yes, they had children, and like all of these things as a kid growing up in the church. But my mom brought the other side of it, and she also brought up old world magic, ritual magi type stuff. And so I grew up with both worlds. We were in the Methodist church. My mom grew up with Catholic church. My dad grew up as a Church of Christ. So it was a very interesting mix.
This is very Sag rising as well, because so many different spiritualities in your home, like so many different belief systems, so many different ways of believing. I mean, with an ascendant like that, you're looking to expand well, it could be your faith or your beliefs, or, if you move into tarot reading, it's expanding your actionability inside of spirituality. What can I do in here? Not just retain or not just receive, right? So what did your mom do was she a magic person for a living, or what did she do as her occupation?
She only read for herself. Like, I just remember as a kid, there were cards, and I grew up with cards and crystals, and there was always incense burning, and amongst other things. But there was always, that was just, it was the 80s. And then the 90s. And it was normal for me, but she never did anything with it. Interestingly, my mom was a dancer. She was a stripper. And then a bar owner and bartender. And it's very interesting, because she took the complete opposite of, my dad was a high-ranking Navy officer. My grandmother was an elementary school teacher and a Girl Scout leader, and like all of these things. And so my mom was like, I don't want to go to college. This is what I want to do. So my mom traveled and was about as 80s and 90s as you get.
I mean, that's not a bad way to live, I mean, like, that's not, I mean, to know yourself, or to know your desires, to know how you want to live your life that early. I think a lot of us would be jealous of something like that. It's just like all of us are trying to fit into some kind of mold, some kind of direction, some career purpose. And your mom was like, you know what? I'm going to just do me.
And that's what's so interesting about it, is because people, when they hear that, and I'm like, make no mistake though, my mom is the most intelligent person that I've ever met in my life. I mean, if it's out there, it's amazing. You can sit down and have a conversation with her on anything, and it is well researched and understood. And if not, she'll be like, let me look at that, let me dig into that. And so people have this misconception of, when they hear tarot or anything like that, magical, whatever, that it automatically means, oh, they lack critical thinking, they lack this. Well, she lacked education, but she didn't want to, because if you ask her to this day, she'll say, no, I took my college fund and I blew it to go travel. I did.
Yeah, she really wanted experience.
Yeah, she was like, and she does. She knows people from all different walks of faith. She's been all over the place. So it's one of those that she lived instead of learned through a textbook.
When she was reading for herself, did she read psychologically? Is that one of the reasons that you got really interested in psychology? Or how did she read for herself?
As far as reading for herself, I'm sure psychology was part of it. But I also know, you have all the spiritual and metaphysical side, and then being well-versed in the Bible and all that was the other side of it. She still has her deck. I've told her, when you pass, I want your deck and your crystal wand. Those are the two things that since I was a little kid, that I'm like, I want these things. I mean, you have the family heirlooms, right? But those are part of her and part of my childhood. As far as the psychology, I've always been interested in why people do what they do. I had a very, I don't like to use the word traumatic, but I had a very difficult childhood, actually, that was not a product of my mother. It was a product of my biological father. And so I've always been interested in why people do what they do, particularly criminal behavior, addiction issues, things like that. And so that really fueled the psychology side of things. It's always interesting to know when you come out of those, you want to understand, like, why did that person do that? What was in there? Where was that trigger? What was, whatever. I think more came from my biological father than it did my mom.
Wow. So this was a person. So your father, not your father who is what would you say, an Army officer? Or...
Yeah, that was the naval officer was my mom's dad, and then my grandfather. So my stepdad is my dad. That's who raised me from the time I was 4. But my biological father really, my parents were married. They got married when they were 16 and 18. And so, yeah, like it was back in the day, or 17 and 19, one of those two. And so it was shortly, I think I was less than a year old when they separated. And a big part of that was domestic violence. And, my father was an alcohol user and stuff like that. And drug user, I'm sure, at that time. And so it was more of like what went on in his life and why he did the things that he did to avoid trigger warnings on her. There are traumatic things that happened to him, or that I should say he was witness to, that subsequently led to his substance abuse use as a young kid. And so then that just steamrolled. So then you want to understand that. And I have mental illness that runs in my family on his side. And so I wanted to understand. It's kind of like, I'm sure you've heard that they say, victims of abuse are likely to abuse. And so it was one of those that it was like, I was also terrified, in essence, that I would in some way abuse my daughter if I didn't understand those things. So that being drawn to the psychology side of things too it was just much of a fear, right? As do I understand it? Like, is this based in truth? Is this reality? Is this number always a statistic? Or, and of course you learn that it's choice. There's, unhealed wounds type of thing, which those generations before, our generation, even our generation as young kids, we were like the first ones that therapy was even like you could go to a therapist, but before us, that was not an option. That was the generation prior to us you didn't do that.
Thank you so much for joining us, and until tomorrow, as above, so below, blessed be.